She swore she would never mix emotions with work, but this time her heart became the target. Protecting the millionaire was her mission, but nobody warned her that the enemy knew everything about her and was always one step ahead. And when she thought she had everything under control, she discovered that her greatest weakness wasn't outside, but inside her chest. What started as protection turned into something neither of them imagined. But when the next attack happens, she will have to choose between the mission and the man who has already captured her heart. And that decision starts now.
The snow fell like small white blades, cutting Lucas's face as he walked with his sister along the nearly deserted sidewalk. The wind blew strongly, making Anna cling to his arm in fear. The streetlights flickered as if they too were weary of the night. Each step was a struggle against the cold that seemed to seep into their bones. Lucas tried to hide his own shivering so as not to frighten his sister. The slippery ground was unforgiving, and the two nearly fell several times. Anna, with her old damp shoes, could barely keep her balance. Lucas squeezed her hand, guiding her as best he could, even without knowing where they were going. He needed to find a place, any place where they could rest. That's what he repeated to himself with every frozen breath. The city's silence was broken only by the wind and the noise of distant cars. The streets seemed too long, and the tall buildings cast shadows that made the atmosphere even more frightening. Anna whimpered softly, trying not to worry her brother. Lucas, despite his fear, tried to smile at her from time to time, encouraging her to keep going. After a few minutes, his eyes fell upon the Aurora Prime building, illuminated as if in another reality. The wide, bright entrance seemed too welcoming to be true. Lucas paused for a moment, taking a deep breath as he watched the light escaping through the glass doors. Here, at least they could shelter from the wind, even if only for a few minutes. The marble steps seemed like a throne compared to the icy street floor. Lucas decided it would be safe for Anna to sit there for a while. Exhausted, she nodded in agreement and settled down beside him. They hugged, trying to share what little warmth remained. The relief would be short-lived, but at that moment it seemed enough. Anna rested her head on Lucas's shoulder, breathing rapidly and tremulously. He covered her with his thin coat, even knowing it would make him even colder. She smiled, even weakly, as if thanking him without words. Lucas felt a pang in his chest when he realized how tired she was. The instinct to protect her was all that kept him going. The snow continued to fall, creating a thin white layer on the children's hair. The glare of the lights reflected on the surface of the ice, making the scene both cold and beautiful. Lucas stroked his sister's hair, trying to keep her awake. Sleep in those conditions was too dangerous. He knew this, even though he couldn't explain why. The cold was becoming almost unbearable, but the building steps offered minimal shelter from the direct wind. Lucas stared at the glass doors, imagining what it would be like to feel that warmth inside. For a moment, he dreamed of a warm place, a blanket perhaps, food. But he quickly shook his head, remembering that those dreams were too distant. Anna finally fell asleep for a few minutes, her small hands relaxing on Lucas's coat. Lucas watched her, worried and attentive to any movement around him. His gaze fixed on the floor for a few seconds, while exhaustion began to weigh more heavily than before. He rested his head behind him and closed his eyes for a moment.
But the tranquility was short-lived. From inside the building, a shadow approached the glass door. Someone's firm hand pushed the door open forcefully, creating a bang that shattered the silence of the night. Lucas opened his eyes immediately, his heart racing. He knew this was not a good sign.
If this first meeting already made your heart race, imagine what's still to come. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and don't miss any chapter of this story full of tension, secrets, and a love that blossoms amidst danger. The door flung open and a blast of hot air escaped into the icy street. Henry rushed out like a hurricane, wearing an expensive coat and sporting an angry expression. His gaze immediately met the two small figures on the steps. He frowned, as if confronted with something that deeply offended him. The look of contempt was impossible to ignore. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, his voice echoing between the buildings. Lucas stood up quickly, still holding Anna, who woke up startled. He tried to answer, but fear caught the words in his throat. Henrique took a few steps forward, increasing the pressure on them. Anna cowered, hiding her face in her brother's coat. Henrique looked around, as if worried about what the neighbors might think seeing them there. "Get out of here! You're making a mess of the driveway," he continued, pointing aggressively toward the sidewalk. Lucas tried to remain calm, but his hands trembled. He opened his mouth to explain that they were just resting a little. His sister is cold. But Henrique showed no sign of empathy. On the contrary, his expression hardened even more. He shook his head, indignant at the boy's simple and innocent request. "That's your problem. This isn't a shelter," he declared, raising his voice. Henrique's posture was that of someone who believed he had total authority over that space, even though it wasn't true. Lucas took a step back, pulling Anna with him. Fear was beginning to replace any attempt to argument, and the night seemed to grow colder with each passing second. Anna sobbed and squeezed Lucas's hand even tighter. Henrique, impatient, raised his arm as if to drag them away. The intention in his gaze was clear and terrifying. Lucas took a step forward, protecting his sister with his own body. His heart was beating so fast he could barely breathe, but he didn't move. "I'll call the police if you don't get out of here right now," Henrique roared, moving even closer. The words echoed through the empty street, hard as punches. Lucas felt his legs go weak, but he stood firm. Anna was crying openly now, her small body trembling with fear and cold.
The tension was so great that the air seemed to grow heavier. Henrique breathed deeply, as if he were about to explode again. Lucas quickly looked around for help, but the street was completely empty. There was no one to defend them. At least, that's what he thought at that moment. What Lucas didn't know was that from the inside, someone was watching everything carefully. Behind the glass, a serious and silent figure followed Henrique's every move and was about to act. Lucas's breath caught in his chest as Henrique took another step forward, his shadow covering the children like a heavy cloud. The wind blew strongly, kicking up snow and making Anna shiver even more. Henrique ran a hand through his hair, irritated, as if their presence were a personal affront. He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest with indignation. The tension was building like a storm about to break. Henrique pointed to the street with a brusque gesture, as if he were expelling something unwanted from his property. Anna gripped Lucas's arm tightly, her hands trembling like leaves in the wind. Lucas tried to think quickly, but fear clouded his thoughts. There was nowhere to run, and the cold made every movement more difficult. The world seemed to shrink around them. "I told you to get out!" Henrique shouted, raising his voice even louder. The sound echoed between the glass and concrete walls, making Lucas feel as if he were trapped inside a drum. He looked into the man's eyes, trying to find some trace of pity, but all he saw was contempt. Anna was sobbing, and her small shoulders trembled uncontrollably. Henrique took another step forward, and Lucas positioned himself in front of his sister, as he had done since they were left alone. His heart was beating too fast, but his legs remained firm, rooted in the snow. He didn't know how to defend Anna. He only knew he needed to try. His voice came out weak but sincere, pleading for just one more moment. This only made Henrique more irritated. "I don't want to hear any excuses," he replied, pointing aggressively away from the steps. The gesture seemed to cut the air like a blade. Lucas swallowed hard, tasting the bitter flavor of fear. His mind searched for any alternative, but nothing seemed possible. Anna just cried, and her crying was like a silent plea to the world. The wind picked up, making everything even crueler. Anna's hair whipped against her face, and Lucas tried to gently wipe it away, even though he was trembling. Henrique moved even closer, now completely consumed by rage. He didn't just want them to leave, he wanted them to disappear. The boy felt his body shrink before the giant figure in front of him.
Henrique raised his hand as if to push them away, and Lucas took a step back, dragging Anna with him. Panic gripped them both, and Lucas's breathing became even more erratic. Anna closed her eyes, expecting the worst, while tears streamed down her cold cheeks. The night seemed to swallow the children without any mercy. For a moment, Henrique hesitated, looking around as if to make sure no one was watching. His arrogance depended on having no witnesses. His face hardened again, and he clenched his teeth as if about to act even more violently. Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. It was a matter of seconds. Anna squeezed her brother's hand so hard she almost hurt him. Lucas felt his body tremble, but he stood between her and the man. Enrique's eyes gleamed with anger, and his posture indicated that he wouldn't give up until he got them out of there. The risk was real, palpable, heavy as the frozen air of that night. The children were completely vulnerable. But when Henrique made his first move to advance, a sound interrupted everything. The slow and controlled opening of the glass door behind him. The figure that emerged was neither hurried nor afraid, just present. And in that instant, Enrique lost all control of the situation without even realizing it. The door opened without a bang this time, as if the building itself had decided to intervene. Ramiro stepped out calmly, his face serious and his eyes attentive. The contrast between him and Enrique was striking. Where Henrique was explosion, Ramiro was profound silence. His gaze swept across the night and landed directly on the children, who huddled on the steps. The air around them seemed to change. Enrique only noticed Ramiro's presence when he heard approaching footsteps. Turning around, his expression shifted from irritation to surprise and then to obvious discomfort. Ramiro maintained his haughty posture, but there was something more in his gaze, a flame of contained indignation. He didn't speak immediately, and this silence made Henrique take a half-step back. The owner's presence was almost physical. "Good evening, Henrique," said Ramiro, his voice low but firm enough to echo in everyone's ears. Henrique tried to regain his composure, adjusting his coat as if that could improve his image. He smiled nervously, trying to downplay the situation. But Ramiro didn't look away for a single second. He seemed to see through the masks. Henrique tried to explain himself even before being questioned. He spoke quickly, stumbling over his words, saying that he only wanted to protect the building. Ramiro raised an eyebrow slightly, as if listening to something improbable. His expression was that of someone who already knew exactly what had happened. Henrique was sweating, despite the cold, a clear sign that he felt exposed. Ramiro took a few steps, placing himself between Henrique and the children. His eyes softened only when he looked at Lucas and Anna, who were trembling from both the cold and the tension. He crouched to their level. "Are you all right?" he asked, with a gentleness that seemed to warm more than any blanket. Anna closed her eyes, expecting the worst, while tears streamed down her cold cheeks. The night seemed to swallow the children without any mercy.
As he stood up, Ramiro faced Henrique again. His tone was different now, harsher, more direct.
"Did you think it was appropriate to yell at two defenseless children in the middle of the night?" he asked, without raising his voice. Henrique tried to justify himself, but the words died before they could reach their destination. Ramiro crossed his arms, expecting something he had nothing to offer. The snow continued to fall around them, but the scene seemed frozen in time. Henrique shifted uncomfortably, while Ramiro stood firm. The building owner didn't need to shout to assert his authority. His gaze was enough to dismantle any excuse. Lucas and Ana watched everything in silence, not fully understanding, but sensing that something had changed. Ramiro then did something unexpected. He walked to the steps and extended his hand to Lucas and Ana. "Come with me," he said, offering the simplest and most powerful gesture of that night. Lucas hesitated, his eyes searching for any sign of danger. But Ramiro's gaze was sincere. It was reassuring. He finally stood up, helping Ana to her feet. Henrique stood motionless, unable to hide his frustration. Seeing the building owner take in those children made him feel rejected, small, irrelevant. But Ramiro didn't pay him any attention at that moment. He guided the brothers into the lobby, where the golden light seemed to melt the cold. Ana took a deep breath, feeling warmth for the first time in hours. As soon as they entered, Ramiro turned to Henrique with one last sentence. "We'll talk later." The tone left no room for doubt. Consequences were coming. Henrique stood outside, swallowed by the icy wind, realizing too late that his cruelty had been witnessed by someone far more powerful than he had imagined. The warmth of the lobby enveloped Lucas and Ana like an unexpected embrace. The temperature difference was so great that Ana shivered as her body began to slowly thaw. Ramiro asked them to wait a moment and walked to the reception, where he spoke to the doorman. His voice was calm, but firm. In a few seconds, he returned with 2 fluffy blankets. Lucas received the blanket cautiously, as if it were too fragile to touch. Ana, however, hugged hers so tightly she seemed to want to disappear inside it. Ramiro observed the scene with gentle eyes, but also heavy with old memories. There was something about that situation that deeply affected him. Compassion seemed mixed with a silent pain. He led the brothers to one of the sofas in the lobby, where the golden light softly illuminated the room. Lucas sat down slowly, keeping Ana by his side as if he still needed to protect her from something. Ramiro knelt calmly before them, as if conversing with equals. There was a rare care in each of his gestures, as if he were trying not to frighten them. "You must be starving," he said in a welcoming tone. Ana nodded, but Lucas looked away, suspicious. Life had taught the boy not to easily trust the kindness of strangers. Ramiro noticed this and didn't insist. He simply stood up and asked the doorman to bring something hot. The smell of chocolate began to fill the air shortly after. When the steaming glasses arrived, Ana held them with both hands, as if receiving a treasure. Her eyes sparkled as she felt the warmth spreading through her fingers. Lucas, still hesitant, watched before accepting his. After a small sip, his shoulders relaxed for the first time that night. The simple sweet taste brought a glimmer of hope. While the children drank, Ramiro sat beside them, keeping enough distance so as not to pressure them. The night outside raged relentlessly, but inside there was a comfortable silence. Ana rested her head on the arm of the sofa, still wrapped in her blanket. Lucas, though tired, remained alert. His eyes kept returning to the door, as if he feared Henrique would reappear. Ramiro sensed this fear and spoke softly. "No one will hurt you here." The phrase hung in the air, filling the space between them. Lucas looked up, finally meeting the man's gaze more attentively. There was sincerity in those words, and the boy felt his heart loosen a little. It was strange to trust, but something about that man seemed secure. Ana, now calmer, approached Lucas and rested her head on his shoulder. He adjusted the blanket over her,
caring as he always did. Ramiro watched this affection with a pang in his chest, remembering very similar nights in his past. The memory of the cold, the hunger, and the loneliness returned with force, but this time accompanied by a purpose. After a few minutes of silence, Ramiro asked if they had anywhere to go. The answer came only with a negative shake of Lucas's head. The boy couldn't form words. There was shame and pain mixed together. Ramiro nodded slowly, as if he understood more than they imagined. That answer would change everything. Finally, Ramiro stood up and told the two that they would stay there as long as they needed. Anna looked up, surprised, as if she couldn't believe what she had heard. Lucas clutched the blanket, taking a deep breath to contain his emotion. The night that had begun as a nightmare was about to turn into something new, something neither of them expected. The lobby was now silent, except for the faint sound of the heating system. Lucas observed his surroundings with restrained curiosity, trying to decipher this place so far removed from everything he knew. Anna, now more comfortable, played with the edge of the blanket, tracing invisible designs on the fabric. Ramiro approached with calm steps, carrying a small tray with bread and fruit. The gesture made the children's eyes light up. Lucas hesitated before touching the food, but Anna couldn't resist and tasted a piece of warm bread. The warmth spread across her face, bringing a shy smile. Ramiro sat down again, this time a little closer. He wanted to talk, but he knew he needed to be careful. Each word should be gentle, so as not to further open wounds.
"How long have you been on the street?" she asked softly. Lucas lowered his gaze and hesitated before answering. His voice was low, almost a whisper. He explained that they had been alone since losing their mother months before. Anna bit her lip, trying to hold back tears as she remembered. Ramiro listened in silence, his face growing more serious with each sentence. It was like hearing the story of a past he had never forgotten. Lucas continued, explaining that they had tried staying in shelters, but were often separated. He wouldn't leave Anna alone, so they ran away whenever they tried to separate them. The boy carried the weight of an adult on his shoulders, which were far too small. Ramiro felt his heart clench at the sight of the strength and fragility mixed in that gaze. It was impossible not to identify with him. "Do you have any relatives?" The question hung in the air. Lucas shook his head slowly. Anna looked away as if it were too difficult to remember. Ramiro ran his hand over his chin, thoughtful. He had made many difficult decisions in his life, but he felt this would be the most important of them all. The silence became a link between the three lives, uniting them in an unexpected way. Anna called Ramiro softly and showed him the drawing she had made with her finger on her own blanket, a little house with 3 people. It was simple, but full of meaning. The innocent gesture deeply touched the man, who swallowed his emotion before it could escape. Lucas watched Ramiro's reaction attentively, realizing that something was changing there, even without knowing what. In an effort to distract the children, Ramiro began to recount some of his own childhood. He spoke of cold nights, dangerous streets, and a person who one day decided to help him when he least expected it. Lucas listened with wide eyes, surprised to discover that this elegant man also knew the pain of the streets. It was the first time he felt that someone truly understood. The more Ramiro spoke, the closer Anna got, as if she felt he was a kind of safe haven. Lucas remained attentive, but something inside him began to melt, like ice that finally finds warmth. For the first time in a long time, he felt he wasn't fighting alone. It was a new, strange, but comforting feeling. The hours passed as they talked, and the lobby became a small refuge hidden from the outside world. The storm raged on, but inside, everything seemed lighter. Ramiro knew that night would change their lives. He just didn't know how much yet. And as he watched the children leaning side by side on the sofa,
he realized that something inside him was also being transformed. Dawn was approaching, but the Aurora Prime lobby remained illuminated as if the night had never ended. While Lucas and Anna rested on the sofa, some residents began to come down to leave for work. The first one stopped upon seeing the children, frowning as if he had found something out of place. Another approached, crossing his arms with a disapproving expression. Murmurs began to rise.
The heavy stares quickly turned into direct judgmental comments. "What are these children doing here?" asked an elegant woman, adjusting her coat as if afraid to touch the air around them. Lucas woke, startled by the tone of voice, pulling Anna closer. Ramiro, who was talking to the doorman, turned immediately upon noticing the discomfort. The emotional temperature of the lobby shifted the instant he approached. The woman looked at Ramiro, hoping he would solve the problem. But contrary to her expectations, the building owner stayed by the children's side. "They spent the night here with me," he said firmly. Some residents exchanged indignant glances, as if it were absurd. Lucas felt his heart clench, fearing that Ramiro would change his mind seeing all that pressure. But Anna held his hand tightly, finding courage in the man before them. Enrique entered the lobby just as the gossip intensified. Noticing the group gathered, he smiled confidently, believing the support was on his side. "I told you this would turn into a mess," he said, his tone a mix of irony and satisfaction. Several residents agreed. Ramiro remained silent for a moment, observing everything, with a look that combined sadness and indignation. Enrique moved even closer, as if he finally had a chance to regain control of the situation. "With all due respect, Ramiro, but this is a high-end building. It's not a shelter. You need to understand that these people can't stay here." Hearing this, Lucas lowered his head, and Anna clung even closer to her brother. The word people, said in that way, hurt more than the cold of the previous night. Ramiro took a deep breath and stepped forward, positioning himself between Enrique and the children. "You're right about one thing," he said calmly. The residents leaned forward to listen, believing he would agree. "This is a high-end building, and precisely for that reason, I expected that those who live here would have higher standards of humanity." The silence that followed was so heavy that no one dared to breathe. Some people were visibly uncomfortable, others irritated. Enrique opened his mouth to argue, but Ramiro raised his hand, asking for silence. "I saw everything you did yesterday, Enrique, every word, every gesture, and I can guarantee that it wasn't the building's security that motivated your actions." Enrique paled, realizing he had been observed. His arrogant posture faltered for the first time. The residents looked at him with surprise and doubt. Ramiro explained that there were cameras all around the entrance and that he had watched the entire scene before going down. "Those children were just trying to survive the coldest night of the year, and you—" His voice faltered for just a second. "You chose to treat two lives as nuisances." The force of the sentence cut through the room like a blade. The elegant woman lowered her eyes, embarrassed. A couple murmured something like, "I didn't know it had been like that." Others simply stood there, unable to form their own judgment. Enrique, now red with shame and anger, tried to argue again, but Ramiro finished firmly. "I will not allow my building to be known for the coldness of the people who live in it." And for the first time, Lucas felt that someone was truly fighting for them.
Enrique realized he was losing control of the situation and decided to act. He tried to approach the residents, speaking quickly, trying to convince them that it had all been a misunderstanding. He said that the children had scared him, that he was afraid they were dangerous, that he had only tried to protect his neighbors. But his words sounded false, and his expression didn't help. It was clear that his concern was only for himself. Ramiro crossed his arms as Enrique explained himself, observing in silence. Lucas and Ana watched the scene closely, feeling as if they were witnessing something they could never have imagined. Enrique seemed to shrink with each sentence, becoming smaller under the weight of his own lie. Some residents tried to support him, but quickly realized there was no possible argument. The truth was there. "Were you afraid of 2 children?" Ramiro asked, his voice calm but laden with controlled irony. The entire lobby fell silent. Enrique swallowed hard, unable to answer. One of the residents, who had previously supported him, took a step back, realizing the absurdity of the situation. The mask of authority that Enrique wore crumbled before everyone. With tension rising, Ramiro approached Enrique, looking him directly in the eyes. "You lied to the residents, you tried to manipulate the situation, and above all, you forgot something basic: decency." The word echoed through the lobby like a final blow. Enrique looked away, unable to face the truth. His posture, once so confident, was now merely a frustrated reflection of someone who had been exposed. Ana squeezed Lucas's hand, seeking reassurance. Lucas, on the other hand, observed everything with an expression strangely mature for his age. He understood that something important was happening, something that, in some way, was changing their destinies. The lobby no longer seemed as hostile as it had a few minutes before. Now there were doubts, thoughtful glances, regretful expressions. Ramiro turned to the residents, saying that the children would be under his responsibility while he decided on more concrete measures. Some nodded in agreement, others remained silent, unable to contradict him. But no one protested. It was as if the decision had imposed a natural order difficult to contest. But Enrique did not accept it so easily. He stepped forward, trying to regain some authority. "You can't just bring people off the street into the building," he shouted, completely losing emotional control. The desperation in his voice revealed more about him than any justification. Ramiro remained calm, like someone who had expected that reaction. Lucas observed Enrique with steady eyes, perceiving the weakness hidden beneath all that pride. That's when Ramiro revealed something no one expected. "I also came from the streets." The phrase fell like a bomb in the lobby. Residents exchanged confused glances. Enrique stood still, his expression frozen. "I grew up without a place to sleep, without anything to eat, and I only changed my life because someone decided to help me." His voice remained firm, but there was intense emotion in every word.
Lucas looked up, surprised. Ana stopped playing with the blanket and approached without realizing it. The entire lobby had changed in that instant. Prejudice and arrogance lost their power in the face of the human truth that Ramiro had just revealed. Enrique's mask fell completely, and the weight of the situation crushed him. No one saw him as an authority anymore, only as someone small in the face of his own cruelty. Finally, Ramiro looked at Lucas and Ana with the same tenderness as before. "No one should go through what I went through," he said, concluding with a firmness that left no doubt. The statement turned the key to everything. Henry no longer had any allies, and Lucas and Ana were finally no longer alone. The lobby finally emptied, leaving only Ramiro, Lucas, and Ana. Emotional tension still hung in the air like an invisible fog. The children, though safer, were exhausted. Lucas could barely keep his eyes open, and Ana yawned as she curled up on the sofa. Outside, the storm intensified, battering against the glass doors as if trying to break through. It was the coldest night of the year, and there was no sign of improvement. Ramiro watched the two with growing concern. Ana trembled slightly, even under the warm blanket, and Lucas kept a distant look, as if he were fighting against his own mind. The man approached and gently touched Lucas's shoulder. The boy reacted slowly, as if he were miles away. Something was wrong, something that went beyond ordinary tiredness. Lucas tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't respond. His hands trembled erratically, and his face was too pale for someone so young. Ana noticed and immediately grabbed his arm, startled. Ramiro crouched before the boy, watching him intently. The heat of the hall didn't seem to affect Lucas's weakened body. Fever crept into his pale face. "Lucas,
"Look at me," Ramiro pleaded, gently lifting his face. The boy's eyes blinked slowly, as if struggling to stay open. Anna began to cry, fearing that her brother was deteriorating too quickly. Ramiro's heart tightened, remembering almost identical moments from his childhood. He knew well what extreme cold could do to a child. The wind outside howled like a warning, and Ramiro understood he had no time to lose. He stood up quickly and took Lucas in his arms, surprising the boy with the strength and gentleness of the gesture. "Let's go now," he said, beckoning Anna with an urgent nod. She ran to his side, clutching his coat with trembling hands. The once welcoming lobby now seemed too small for the gravity of the situation. Ramiro strode across the building with long, firm strides, ignoring the curious glances that appeared. His only focus was keeping Lucas conscious as he made his way to the garage. The boy rested his head on the man's shoulder, murmuring incoherent words. Anna followed behind, crying softly, trying not to disturb them. Her whole world was in Ramiro's arms at that moment.
Upon entering the car, Ramiro carefully placed Lucas in the back seat, covering him with the blanket Anna was carrying. The girl sat beside him, desperately holding his hand. The car started, and the heater kicked in immediately. Even so, Lucas was trembling. Ramiro gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind mixing the present with painful flashes of the past. He wouldn't let history repeat itself. The storm made visibility difficult, but Ramiro drove without hesitation. Each traffic light, each curve, each braking maneuver seemed longer than it actually was. Anna watched her brother the whole time, wiping away tears that insisted on falling. She spoke to him, trying to keep him awake, but Lucas barely responded. The air inside the car carried the weight of urgency and fear. Upon arriving at the clinic, Ramiro quickly got out of the car and carried Lucas in his arms. The warmth of the place enveloped him, but it didn't dispel the worry in his eyes. A nurse approached upon seeing the situation, and Ramiro explained everything in a few words. Anna followed behind, sobbing, as she watched her brother being taken for treatment. It was as if the world was crumbling around her. While Lucas was being treated, Ramiro stayed by Anna's side, kneeling down to be at her level. He placed his hands on her shoulders and said with all the conviction he possessed, "I promise he'll be all right." The girl hugged him tightly, as if he were the only anchor amidst the chaos. And for the first time, Ramiro realized that he was already connected to those children in a way he could no longer deny. The clinic corridor seemed endless as Ramiro waited for news. Anna, sitting beside him, clutched the blanket between her fingers as if it were a talisman. The silence was only broken by the hurried footsteps of nurses and the distant beeping of medical equipment. With each passing second, Ramiro's heart seemed to beat faster. He felt a mixture of fear and guilt growing inside him. When the door finally opened, a doctor approached with a serious but calm expression. She explained that Lucas had moderate hypothermia and signs of extreme exhaustion. If they had waited a few more minutes, the situation could have been much worse. Anna began to cry upon hearing this, and Ramiro immediately hugged her, holding her as if she were his own daughter. The mixture of relief and dread left them both speechless. The doctor said Lucas was being warmed and would receive IV fluids until he stabilized. She allowed Anna to see him, provided she remained calm. Ramiro entered the room with the girl, and the sight of the boy lying there, connected to wires and covered with thermal blankets, hit them like a silent blow. Anna rushed to his side, carefully taking his hand. Lucas opened his eyes for a moment, weak but conscious enough to recognize his sister. Ramiro stood at the door for a few seconds, watching the two of them. The scene stirred deep memories within him, memories of himself in a similar bed, fighting for his life while someone who believed in him held his hand. He took a deep breath, feeling an old weight shift within his chest.
It was as if the past was repeating itself, but now he was on the other side. Now he was the one who could save them.
As he approached the bed, Ramiro placed his hand on Lucas's forehead, feeling the fever beginning to subside. The boy looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and fragility, and Ramiro returned the look with a gentle smile. "You are strong," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Lucas closed his eyes again, allowing himself to rest for the first time without fear. Anna remained by his side, vigilant as always. Time passed slowly. Ramiro stayed by the children's side, refusing to leave them alone for even a moment. The doctor returned later to inform them that Lucas was responding well to treatment, but would need rest and constant care. This brought immense relief, but also a decision to which Ramiro knew he was already bound, not to allow them to return to the streets. Not after all this. In a moment of silence, Anna fell asleep in the chair beside the bed. Ramiro covered her with her blanket, gently arranging her hair. He watched her for a few seconds, reflecting on how two such fragile children could carry so much strength. It was evident that they had survived out of pure love for each other, and he felt that he now had a responsibility that went beyond moral obligation. It was emotional. Looking at Lucas again, Ramiro realized how much the boy reminded him of himself. The same silent resistance, the same fear disguised as courage, but also the same urgent need for a home. He felt his eyes burn, something rare for a man who had learned to swallow his feelings his whole life. In that simple room, something was changing inside him irreversibly. The storm raged outside against the windows, as if demanding an immediate decision, and Ramiro knew exactly what decision he needed to make. He couldn't change the past, but he could change the future, especially the future of those two lives. There, before the sleeping boy, he made a silent promise. He would never again let them face the world alone. Never again. Morning arrived slowly, bringing with it a soft light that filtered through the curtains of the room where Lucas rested. He breathed more easily, and his complexion began to return to normal. Anna woke first, her eyes still swollen but illuminated by hope at seeing her brother better. Ramiro, who had spent the night in an uncomfortable armchair, rose with a sore back and a determined expression. It was a new day, and he was ready to face anything. The doctor entered with a discreet smile, informing them that Lucas was out of danger. She explained that the extreme cold had taken a toll on his body, but that his recovery would be quick with food, rest, and warmth. Anna sighed in relief and held her brother's hand tighter, as if she feared something might take him back to the suffering of the previous night. Lucas slowly opened his eyes, first meeting his sister's gaze, and then Ramiro's. He tried to speak, but his voice came out weak. Ramiro told him not to strain himself and assured him that everything was all right now. Lucas watched the man with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. He couldn't understand why someone so important cared so much about them. It was a new and confusing feeling, but a good one. Anna smiled and rested her head on his, as if Ramiro's presence completed something that was missing in their lives.
After a few minutes of comforting silence, the doctor asked to speak with Ramiro outside. In the hallway, she explained the seriousness of the situation and emphasized that, emotionally, the children needed stability, something they rarely found on the streets or in shelters. Ramiro listened attentively to every word, feeling the weight of responsibility increase. It wasn't just a momentary decision, it was something that would change his life forever. When he returned to the room, he found Lucas looking at him curiously. The boy seemed to want to ask something, but hesitated. Ramiro sat on the edge of the bed with a calm smile. "You'll be all right," he said, running his hand through the boy's hair. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the gesture with a confidence he had never felt before. It was as if he had finally found someone capable of carrying him when he had no strength left. Anna asked to sit on Ramiro's lap,
and he welcomed her naturally. She rested her head on his chest as if she had been familiar with that embrace for years. Ramiro felt something tighten in his heart, a mixture of nostalgia, affection, and responsibility. It was impossible to deny that those children had already occupied a deep space in his life, and he realized he didn't want it to be any different. Later, when Lucas was more awake, Ramiro told him a little more of his own story. He said that, like them, he too had faced cold nights, hunger, and fear. He spoke of how he had been rescued by a kind man, someone who believed in him when no one else did. Lucas listened attentively, surprised and touched. It was the first time he had seen an adult admit so much vulnerability without any shame. "He gave me a chance," Ramiro said, looking at them both. Lucas's eyes widened, and Ana lifted her head to see his face. There was something new in Ramiro's gaze, a silent, strong, unbeatable determination. It was the promise of a destiny that began there, in that clinic room, and that would change everything. Late in the afternoon, Lucas finally managed to sit up on his own, still weak but smiling. Ana stayed by his side the whole time, and Ramiro remained nearby like a protective shadow. When the doctor authorized his discharge for the following day, Ramiro thanked her, but he already knew he wouldn't allow those children to return to the streets. The decision was made, even if he hadn't yet said it aloud. From that day forward, they would no longer be alone.
The following morning, Ramiro helped Lucas walk to the car, while Ana held his hand tightly. The wind was still cold, but the sun appeared timidly, as if wanting to illuminate the beginning of something new. When they arrived at Aurora Prime, some residents were in the lobby, observing with curiosity and judgment. Ramiro, however, was not intimidated. His steps were firm, and his gaze conveyed a quiet authority that no one dared to challenge.
As soon as they entered, it was clear there was tension in the air. Some residents whispered amongst themselves. Others crossed their arms with cold expressions. Henrique was among them, his face closed and his countenance heavy. He took a few steps forward, trying to regain his previous composure. "So this is how it's going to be?" he asked, his voice dripping with venom. "Are we going to turn the building into a shelter now?" Ramiro stared at him slowly, like someone analyzing a condemned artifact. "We are going to transform this building into a humane place," Ramiro replied with controlled firmness. Henrique laughed, but the sound came out weak and shaky. The confrontation was inevitable, and the residents knew it. Ramiro asked everyone to gather in the common area for an extraordinary meeting. Although some protested, no one dared to refuse. Everyone followed, as if something bigger was about to happen, and it was. In the meeting room, Ramiro sat Lucas and Ana down in one of the chairs and stood before the residents. He took a deep breath and began to speak, explaining everything that had happened. He spared no details: Henrique's coldness, the humiliation, the risk the children had faced, and the fact that, had he not intervened, Lucas might not have survived. Each word fell like a direct accusation, impossible to deny. The residents began to murmur, some shocked, others embarrassed. Henrique, on the other hand, clenched his fists in anger, unable to accept that he was being exposed in front of everyone. He tried to defend himself, saying that his intention was to protect the building, but his words no longer had power. It was too late to pretend. Ramiro raised his hand, asking for silence. His authority was respected, not out of fear, but because of the truth he carried. "Henrique," Ramiro said, turning directly to him, "your conduct is unbecoming of someone who lives in a community. You are cruel, inhumane, and put lives at risk." The man paled, realizing the sentence was approaching. Therefore, as of today, your stay at Aurora Prime is over." The hall fell into absolute silence. It was the first time anyone had seen Ramiro be so decisive, and no one doubted his decision. Henrique tried to react, but his voice came out uncontrolled, powerless. He looked around for support, but found none. Residents who had previously followed him now looked away, unable to defend him. He was alone with his arrogance, and the fall was final. Finally, he left the hall, slamming the door, carrying with him the weight of his own choices. Justice had been served, not with aggression, but with dignity. Ramiro then turned to the residents. He said that from then on, the building would adopt a social support program, offering help to homeless people and promoting solidarity campaigns. Some seemed surprised, others moved. The community was beginning to transform, little by little, born from a painful but powerful event. The change began at that moment.
Lucas and Anna watched everything with wide eyes. It was the first time they had seen adults arguing for their own good, not against them. Ramiro approached and placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "You don't need to be afraid anymore," he said, his voice low but firm. To the children, it was like hearing someone promise a new world, and for the first time, it seemed possible. The residents began to emerge, murmuring amongst themselves, but with less harsh expressions. Some even approached to ask if Lucas was feeling better, something that deeply surprised him. Anna smiled, sensing that perhaps that building wasn't so frightening anymore. Ramiro observed everything with a mixture of relief and hope. It was the beginning of a new phase for everyone. The atmosphere at Aurora Prime felt different that afternoon. The building, which had previously seemed cold and distant, now seemed to welcome Lucas and Anna with greater gentleness. Ramiro led them to the apartment on the top floor, where a panoramic view of the city opened up like a horizon full of possibilities. Upon entering, the children stood still for a few seconds, admiring the spacious and bright space. It was the complete opposite of everything they knew. Anna ran to the window, fascinated by the height, while Lucas stayed closer to the door, carefully observing everything. The apartment was elegant, yet comfortable, with details that reflected Ramiro's personality. Books everywhere, discreet paintings, and well-tended plants. It was a home, and that was something the children didn't immediately know how to recognize. They were both amazed and frightened at the same time. Ramiro walked over to them, a genuine smile on his face. "You'll stay here for now," he said, opening the door to a hastily prepared room. There were 2 warm beds, soft blankets, and a lamp with a soft light. Anna rushed in, touching every corner as if to make sure it was real. Lucas stood in the doorway, watching with a mixture of joy and apprehension. It was difficult for him to trust in stability. "If you want to change anything here, you can let me know," said Ramiro, leaning against the door frame. Anna ran to him, hugging his leg with the spontaneous gesture of a child who feels safe. Ramiro bent down and hugged her back, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in years. Lucas, for his part, simply nodded, still processing everything. The emotion was too profound to be expressed in words. After exploring the room, the children went to the kitchen, where Ramiro was preparing a simple but hot meal. The aroma filled the apartment, causing an almost automatic reaction in Lucas. The smell of home-cooked food was something he hadn't smelled in a long time. Anna immediately sat down at the table, swinging her feet expectantly. Ramiro smiled when he saw the 2 of them there, as if the scene were part of an old dream. During lunch, Anna told funny stories about life with Lucas, trying to make her brother smile. And he did smile, even if shyly. Ramiro observed this dynamic with affection, as if each small gesture were a gift. Their relationship was beginning to take shape, and little by little, the apartment was filled with laughter and conversations that hadn't existed in that previously silent space. It was a discreet, yet powerful rebirth.
After the meal,
They spent some time in the living room, where Anna was captivated by a building set, and Lucas found an illustrated children's book. Ramiro sat on the sofa, simply enjoying the scene. There was something deeply symbolic about seeing those children occupying that space. It wasn't charity, it was connection. He felt he was exactly where he should be, doing what he had promised himself so many years ago. Later, while the children rested, Ramiro walked around the apartment reflecting on everything that had happened. Their presence brought a mixture of joy and responsibility that deeply affected him. He knew he could no longer live as before. He had been transformed by the courage and fragility of those two siblings, and this made him reconsider his future in a way he had never imagined. That night, Lucas approached Ramiro shyly, clutching the blanket to his chest. "Can we really stay?" he asked in a low voice, as if fearing the answer. Ramiro knelt down to the boy's level and gently held his shoulders. "Yes, for as long as you need." Lucas's eyes filled with restrained tears, and he hugged Ramiro with unexpected strength. It was the beginning of a new bond, strong and true. Anna, awakened by the movement, approached and embraced them both, forming a silent but meaningful circle. Ramiro closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the moment with a heavy heart. He no longer saw Lucas and Anna as temporary guests. He saw them as part of something bigger, something he hadn't known he needed until that day. It was the beginning of a new family, even if neither of them had fully realized it yet. The following days brought an unexpectedly sweet routine to Ramiro's apartment. Anna ran from one side to the other with renewed energy, exploring every corner as if it were an adventure. Lucas, more reserved, attentively observed everything, learning to feel comfortable in this new world. Ramiro adapted his work schedule to be more present, something he had never done before. The apartment now vibrated with life. In the morning, Ramiro prepared coffee, while Anna drew at the table and Lucas helped tidy things up. It was a simple scene, but full of meaning. Ramiro felt a warmth in his chest whenever he saw the two of them there. It was as if he had recovered a part of himself that had been lost many years ago. He felt lighter, more human, more complete. The children, without realizing it, were healing old wounds that he thought were permanent.
In the afternoons, they would go for short walks, nothing far, as Lucas was still recovering. Anna loved observing the tall buildings and lights, always making funny comments that made Ramiro laugh. Lucas, in turn, was gradually opening up, asking questions, showing curiosity. His confidence grew day by day, and each step forward was a silent victory that Ramiro celebrated inwardly.
Inside the building, the children's presence also began to transform the atmosphere. Some residents, initially suspicious, began to greet them warmly. One lady offered cookies, another left welcome notes. The previously cold and distant atmosphere became more welcoming. It was as if Ramiro's kindness had created a domino effect, awakening humanity where there had previously been indifference. One night, while Ramiro was preparing dinner, Lucas approached with a serious look. "You're not going to send us away, are you?" he asked, his fear still hidden between the lines. Ramiro immediately put down his spoon and knelt before the boy. "Never. You are not guests. You are part of my life now." Lucas took a deep breath, as if finally accepting it. Anna ran and hugged Ramiro, celebrating without even fully understanding. After dinner, the three spent some time together in the living room. Anna played with colorful pieces, creating shapes that only she understood. Lucas watched in silence, but with a sparkle in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Ramiro observed the two, sensing that this moment was precious. It was simple, but it had the weight of eternity. Each laugh, each touch, each conversation reinforced the bond that was forming between them. Later, while the children slept, Ramiro sat alone in the living room, illuminated only by the bedside lamp. He reflected on the difference those lives were making in his own. He felt a strong, sudden impulse, perhaps courage,
perhaps destiny, that made him pick up the phone and research the first steps for temporary guardianship. The simple act made him smile. It was as if he was finally accepting who he wanted to be. Before going to sleep, Ramiro went to the children's room. Anna was fast asleep, hugging a toy she had chosen earlier. Lucas was also asleep, but his expression was serene, without any trace of the tensions of the recent past. Ramiro watched them for a few minutes, feeling his heart warm. He knew he would do anything for them. It was an absolute, solid, unquestionable certainty. When he turned off the light, the house was silent. But it was a different kind of silence, welcoming, full of meaning. Ramiro lay down on his bed with the feeling that something important was about to happen. He didn't know that the next morning an unexpected visit would put everything they had built to the test. A visit that would define the true future of this new family. The following morning dawned peacefully, with the sun streaming through the windows and warming the apartment with a soft light. Anna woke first and ran to the kitchen where Ramiro was making coffee while humming softly, a new routine that had already become a comfort to the three of them. Lucas appeared shortly after, still sleepy, but smiling as he smelled that welcoming scent. Everything seemed perfect, as if life had finally found a safe rhythm. It was peace, pure and simple. However, the doorbell rang suddenly, breaking the calm and causing Lucas and Anna to exchange surprised glances. Ramiro walked to the door, thinking it would be a resident or a delivery, but upon opening it, he found a man in a formal suit, with a serious expression and a folder of documents in his hands. "Good morning, Mr. Ramiro. I'm from the Child Protective Services. We need to talk." The atmosphere changed immediately, as if a shadow had crossed the hallway.
Anna ran behind Ramiro, clutching his coat tightly, while Lucas watched with growing concern. The man entered, with permission, and sat at the table, slowly opening his briefcase. He explained that they had received a report about 2 children found in the street, and that they needed to investigate the situation. It wasn't a threat, it was mandatory procedure, but the words for Anna and Lucas sounded like the beginning of a painful separation. Ramiro remained calm, though his heart was racing. He recounted everything that had happened, from the encounter on the steps to Lucas's recovery at the clinic. He hid nothing, not even his future intentions to take responsibility for the children. The agent listened attentively, taking notes. With each detail revealed, the atmosphere seemed to oscillate between fear and hope. Lucas observed every movement, trying to guess the outcome. The officer then asked to speak with the children. Anna, trembling, answered first, holding Ramiro's hand the whole time. She spoke about the cold, about Lucas getting sick, and about how Ramiro had taken care of him. She said she had never slept so warmly in her entire life. Lucas, in turn, spoke more seriously. If he hadn't helped, he began, but his voice faltered. The officer wrote down every word, his expression gentler than at the beginning. After listening to the children, the agent took a deep breath and closed the folder. He remained silent for a few seconds, analyzing all the information. Ramiro, restless, stood firm, ready to fight if necessary. The children moved closer to him, as if they feared being taken away at any moment. Finally, the man raised his eyes and smiled for the first time since he had arrived. A small but sincere smile. "It's clear you found a safe place here, and it's clear that Mr. Ramiro is offering not just shelter, but family." The words made Anna let out a relieved sigh, and Lucas relaxed his shoulders. Ramiro closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a deep gratitude spread through his chest. But the agent continued. "Even so, we need to formalize this situation, and if you agree, we will begin the temporary guardianship process immediately." Lucas looked at Ramiro, waiting for his reaction. Anna held his hand, afraid of what was to come. Ramiro took a deep breath and replied with a calm firmness. "I want to officially take over. I want them to stay with me." The agent nodded, satisfied. From that moment on, a new path opened before them. A path that wouldn't be simple, but it would be real, legal,
and protected, a chance to build something permanent. With the visit concluded, the agent said goodbye and left the apartment, promising to return in the coming days with the necessary documents. As the door closed, Ana ran into Ramiro's arms, who easily lifted her up. Lucas approached slowly, but ended up embracing them both in a spontaneous and meaningful gesture. The trio remained like that for long seconds, as if they needed to confirm that they were truly safe.
Sunlight streamed through the room, illuminating them like a silent blessing. Ramiro felt that, for the first time in years, his life truly made sense. Lucas and Ana, in turn, understood that they no longer needed to fear the future. He had someone who would stand by their side no matter what happened. It was a simple but powerful promise, one that no official document could measure. And while the world outside continued on its course, in that apartment, a new family was born without ceremony, without announcement, without formalities, just with love, courage, and the certainty that after so much cold, they had finally found the warmth they had always sought. And although they didn't know what would come next, they were ready to face any storm together. If this story captivated you from beginning to end, then you deserve to experience every twist and turn that's yet to come. Click on Sign Up and continue following this intense romance, full of risks, passion, and choices that could change everything. Press the button and come experience each chapter with us.